Bleach was something special that stood as tall as the rest of the big three. The characters were emotionally complex, dark and mature, the world was layered and organic, and the supernatural powers fulfilled every demand for power fantasy fans. And Berserk fans. It wrapped it up in what is possibly the strongest art in all of shonen, making for not only one of the most gripping stories at the time, but also the most accessible. It had all the ingredients to be a masterpiece, which is why it was hard to see it never get back on its feet after the Soul Society arc.
But the biggest hit we the audience took wasn't Bleach's slow but eventual downfall before the suddenly rushed ending, it was Kubo, the mangaka. I don't think there's a single person capable of actually disliking Bleach. I can barely understand being ambivalent towards it, but I do understand being disappointed with what it could have been. And that's all because Kubo's potential is amongst the greatest, he just couldn't deliver it on a weekly schedule designed to exhaust mangakas. And that's why we're so excited for the possibility of his newest story, Burn the Witch.
Burn the Witch takes from Harry Potter, but improves it with Ghibli elements from its world to its characters to its magical tools. Similar to how Fire Force blends firefighters and traditional fantasy figures like witches, knights and devils, Burn the Witch blends traditional witch tropes like dragons and sci-fi with their flying broom. The world is way too pretty for its own good. Like, seriously, the most unrealistic part about the whole thing isn't the magic or dragons, it's London looking nice. It's also supposedly set in Bleach's universe, which I don't even know how that works.
And then we have our protagonist who are an unconventional blast. Noelle is blunt and direct whilst Nini is grumpy and careless. It's already a fun dynamic in itself, but it's enhanced by their roles and narrative. See, Noelle is a reactive character comfortable with her position and power, whilst Nini is incredibly active, wanting to achieve more. And as they have to work together, it means Noelle, who would normally not bother, is forced to participate in the events of the story. If this sounds familiar to you, it's because Kubo applied the same narrative dynamic to Ichigo and Rukia in the early arcs. But this isn't an unoriginal spin on his early work. Noelle and Nini are a breath of fresh air that thought more along these lines, already making them different to the norm. It's also just really cool to have two incredibly interesting female protagonists that don't fall under terrible cliche tropes.
Stop it. Stop.
And it doesn't stop there. The side characters are also great. Baogo was my greatest concern, but Kubo managed to balance him perfectly. His goofy naivety comes off truly earnest, and he never gets in the way of our protagonist like an annoying escort mission. He's genuinely just a kind-hearted guy that only makes Noelle and Nini more interesting to watch. There isn't much to say about Billy other than it just confirms Kubo cannot make uncool old men. And then we have Bruno. Kubo, why is he hot? I'm simping for a Grimmjow wannabe. Okay, that's not true. Bruno's definitely inspired by Grimmjow, but he's just kind of inspired by Grimmjow. And that ain't a bad thing either. I love Grimmjow, and it's to be expected character types would carry over from one series to another. The only problem I have with Bruno is he gets outplayed a bit too much to ever be considered a threat. He gets tricked by Nini and Noelle, and fails to do any damage. He gets tricked by Nini and Noelle, and fails to do any damage to Cinderella twice. It's not a major issue, but hurts his presence in the story. Speaking of which,
there is one character we didn't touch on, Macy. And that's because her character affects the narrative the most as the catalyst for our main antagonist.
Bars! Bars!
It's also his biggest weakness. That sounds a lot worse than it actually is. Burn the Witch puts more emphasis on developing the world and characters and lets the story take a backseat. The concepts are great, it was genuinely surprising how much focus there was on how the media twist the facts for a good story, but the actual events between Macy and Eri, the heart of the narrative, needed more time to develop. And that's what I would say in general for Burn the Witch. We just needed more. The characters, world, magic and story are all great, but over time, it could be amazing.
And that brings us back to Kubo. He doesn't make the most original stories, worlds or characters. He doesn't need to. What he does is create something fresh, something we never expected to see from him. He made something fun, something we never really see, especially in 2020. Reading his work is so effortless, and whether or not Bleach has aged well is debatable. But I think we can all agree, Kubo will always be amongst the best. Kubo will always be a part of the big three.
You magnificent son of a bitch!